Right. Firstly, I'd like to thank all of you for coming today, to making time in your busy agendas. We're all got so much to do in this day and age, but thank you so much for giving us the time today. For people who don't know me, my name is Laurie Turnbull. I'm from Wairau. I'm a recently retired corrections officer. I'm a father of 6 children, and I'm here today with my beautiful wife, Marissa. Somewhere. She's here. I know she's here. There she is at the back. Thanks, Dale. Thank you for coming. Well, I'm so proud to be nominated as a New Zealand First candidate for Napier. We've got a candidate in Napier. Thank you all. Thank you. Napier, as we know, it's an electorate and political meltdown. In a country that has got the worst housing, health, education, crime in decades. It's the worst we've had in decades. And of course, the cost of living. It's just through the roof. People can't survive. Everything's just got that expensive. I'll be out and about leading up to the election. We will be having workshops, meetings at different venues. You'll all be advised. I hope you can all come along and listen to our manifesto and what New Zealand First is going to do to bring this country back. The sad part is now we're a broken democracy. Democracy in this country is a thing of the past. New Zealand First will bring that back. We'll bring back democracy to New Zealand. We're here today primarily for the guest speaker, Mr. Winston Peters. I'll just read a few of his amazing feats. The Right Honourable Winston Peters is the leader of the New Zealand First, entering Parliament in 1978, and has been a prominent figure in New Zealand politics for over 40 years. He has served as a Deputy Prime Minister twice, Treasurer, Minister of Foreign Affairs twice, and Acting Prime Minister from the 21st of June 2018 to the 2nd of August 2018. Born and raised in the rural Northland, he is a New Zealander with Maori father and Scottish mother, and is one of 11 siblings. Wow. As a student, he worked in many labouring jobs, as a blast furnace worker, Newcastle, Australia for BHP, a tunneler, 11 miles underground in the Snowy Mountains. He is a former primary and secondary school teacher and a qualified BA, as well as an LLB. And he had his own practice in Auckland. He was a member of the famous Gallagher Shield winning Auckland University rugby team, captain of the Auckland Māori rugby team, and the player for the New Zealand Māori invitation team. His career is well known in raising many issues of public concern. He has been slow to criticise both the media and the elitism and exposing anti-democratic practices. He believes in one nation, one people, one flag, and democracy, where each vote has the same value. Mr. Peters resigned from Parliament in 1993, gained a new mandate in a by-election that year, received 90.7% of the vote, the largest majority ever received by a single candidate in New Zealand politics, and a momentous occasion that had gone down in New Zealand political history. He then went on to form New Zealand First Party, now in its 30th year. He has helped form 4 different governments, involved in 4 different prime ministers. He is widely known as the first name of having received a letter from England that was only addressed Winston, New Zealand. And he got the letter. So please join me in welcoming the Right Honourable Mr. Winston Peters.
Good afternoon, and thank you for being at this War Memorial Centre for this meeting today, and also for coming along and having the chance of speaking with you. Could I also say that I'm delighted to be referring to Lawrence Turnbull, who is our candidate for Napier, and you've just heard him. And also here is Helmer Vermeulen from Rangitikei electorate, and Tira P from Taupo electorate, as we go around the country announcing these candidates and for having the grit and the courage to stand up and fly the flag for a party called New Zealand First. So thank you very much. Now, could I say, as Winston Churchill said in referring to this war memorial, a nation who forgets its past has no future. We are in the heat of a political campaign where, to recalibrate Henry Ford's famous words, some parties are campaigning on what they haven't done, and others are campaigning on what they are going to do. Well, there's a whole lot of people out there saying things that they haven't done and expecting you after 5 years to believe they're going to start doing them now. And then there are some hoping to build a reputation on what they're going to do. But before any party makes political promises to you in this campaign about how they're going to pick your province up alongside the rest of New Zealand, please ask what have they budgeted to fix in the Hawke's Bay and areas so damaged by the Auckland weather event and by Cyclone Gabriel. What have they promised to do here before they make all the other promises around the rest of the country? It's estimated that we need between 8 and 14 billion, that's $14,000 million, to fix up the damage. So keep that figure in mind when all other promises are being made. Don't please become the Christchurch, still not rebuilt 12 long years later. That's the danger that the Hawke's Bay, and dare I say it, up there in Piha and other parts of the country, face if they're just simply the victims of all sorts of promises and then forgotten. And by the way, the worst things you've got going on here for everybody to share or be the victim of is the roading and the potholes. Did I notice? Well, how much car insurance can you carry? Hawke's Bay, like other provinces, is an engine room of the economy. A fact so widely recognised when COVID came to this country in 2020, but how quickly they forgot when COVID was over. How important you were to this country's economic well-being. Currently, as some of us have said it would, New Zealand is in an economic recession. Not saying it now. On the 4th of December last year, we came here to Napier and said this country's heading to a recession. Now, we don't want to be wise after the fact. You need to be wise before the fact. And all the rest said, no, we're not facing a recession. But on the 4th of December last year, we said at the racecourse here, and here it is, right now in this country. You know, we're in an economic recession, spending much more than we are earning. Everybody that does the household budget knows this. In fact, a massive $1,000 million more a week. That's $1 billion more per week than before COVID. And so when these experts and, dare I say, these commentators start speaking about how good things are, please ask them to reconcile that as you're struggling to reconcile it here in your communities, in your councils, and in your homes. And taxation is up 54%. 54%. The question you're probably asking is, what on earth are they doing with all this money? And how am I going to pay for it? Because just in case you don't know who's going to pay for it, madam, when you go to the mirror tomorrow morning, that'll be the person you're looking at. And when you have a shave, it'll be the person you're looking at who's going to be paying for this. It's probably that you think there is something surreal, incredible, unbelievable about the campaign promises currently being made. So many of these promises you will find are incredible. And you're right. That sort of political climate occurs when politicians are allowed to get away with the most preposterous claims that have no connection to reality before, now, or in the future. And we can look around this audience today, and thank you for all being out and packing this place, but there are people here who know of this country's past when we were number 1 or 2 in the world. We're not talking about some hopeless dream and promise about what we could do when we used to have politicians mainly who had never been to university and got an education. Must be a problem, that, isn't it? It's starkly, sad, but you have heard the Labour Party goal, when you talk about these promises, the Labour Party goal of 0 suicides, or of their target of 0 road deaths, or 0 smoking by 2025. Just 3 promises that surely must sound preposterous. But there it is with all these millions of dollars of public relations and spin doctors pretending that somehow this is true. You just need one car to have a failed brake system and you're going to have a road death. Of course we'd love to have and live in the perfect world where all this was correct. But we're living on earth and it ain't heaven. And stop carrying on as though somehow these fatal little demons can deliver it. Because they can't. There was a time in New Zealand politics when such aspirations would have been laughable, but today they are government policy with not a hope in Hades. You know where Hades is, don't you? Of them ever being achieved. The 0 suicide target was set alongside $1.8 billion to go towards mental health. And that $1.8 billion, that's $1,800 million, has secured only 5 hospital beds. And there are journalists here and from people from the media, and they know all that. It's all a fact. All of this happened, of course, when New Zealanders were legalising assisted deaths in a referendum. And legalising assisted deaths means you're going to have suicides which are legal. But it didn't affect this government, or the past Prime Minister, or the present one. They kept on talking about 0 suicides, as though you're utterly stupid. But you're not, are you? Sometimes when you're looking at people and giving them the facts, you come to the conclusion these people must be all heading on their way to heaven because they're so forgivable. They forgive everything. They forgive, excuse the language, but they forgive absolute crap being paid for by themselves, like this target. But there it is with all the money that you know should be spent on a doctor or a nurse or a policeman or somebody essential in our society, and not them. Of course, mental health deserves serious political focus, but making bloated promises whilst delivering minimal outcomes is actually contempt for the tax-paying public. It's contempt for you. Setting 0 road deaths and then presiding over a huge jump in road fatalities. That's what happens. They set 0 road deaths, but road fatalities has gone that way, including the doubling of deaths from drunk driving. Tells us all how disconnected with reality too many politicians are. That's what they said was the target. This is what's happened, but they still kept the target. These road deaths will only change for the better when the police are told to enforce our road safety laws, including catching and punishing drunk drivers. And the number of people who've died from drunk driving fatalities has just doubled in this time. The laws will clearly not work if we have police unable to do their jobs, enforce the law, creating road breath tests, stopping drunk drivers from being behind the wheel, and properly punishing them when they are. How many times have you seen, this is the 11th, 12th, or 13th times this person has done that? And the question you're asking yourselves, what's that person doing behind the wheel, and who's the next family they're going to kill? But it's tolerated. while these people say to you, oh, we are for zero road deaths. And if the government has a serious goal of being smoke-free in 2025, then why are billions of dollars in smoke tax revenue in their forward budgets 24, 25 and 26? You look like an accountant, sir. You've got a set of glasses on. Can you tell me, how does this work? They're going to have zero smoking by 2025, but in the budget, they've got all these billions they're picking up from tobacco taxes. 2024, 25 and 26. This is breathtaking in its stupidity. Because when we were number one in the world, most of the members of Parliament had never seen the inside of a university. Now they all have, but that's all they've seen. They've never seen the inside of a workplace or a business, have they? Well, as my father would say, when it comes to cooking, they couldn't boil water. And it shows. These tax revenue figures from tobacco sales make a lie of the government's promise, but they carry on as if New Zealanders are just simply stupid. All this is happening whilst both our education and health systems are in a serious crisis. And we're losing many of our young people who in election year are simply voting with their feet and going off to another country with better prospects. So sad. We learned this week that whilst bringing in a staggering 100,000 immigrants this year alone, that's how many we're bringing in at the moment, and this year, 2023, 100,000 immigrants. In the last 8 months, we haven't been successful in securing one overseas trained doctor. 8 months. Millions of dollars spent in a recruitment program. Nobody's coming at all. And it's likely the same goes for teaching and specialists in our education system not being much better. You know, New Zealand has always needed focused immigration to fill some of the gaps in our economy and society. But 100,000 immigrants in 1 year without the infrastructure, the homes, the hospitals or the schools is just a nightmare that you in the Hawke's Bay are going to be paying for, and Cyclone Gabriel victims will not be compensated if this happens. That's the stupidity that's going on. 100,000 coming to a country of 5.1 million. They're alarmed in the UK. They've got 600,000 coming to a population of 67 million. And they're in a crisis, trying to get infrastructure. And yet we're bringing 100,000 for only 5.1 million. The problem is 2.5 times as bad. And here they go, one more time around the merry-go-round of cost without any forward planning whatsoever. That's why the 2023 election is critical. And that's why we're asking you to please get involved if you give a damn about your country. 70% of this number of 100,000 immigrants coming in this year will all be going to Auckland. And it's likely that the people you need to bolster your economy will not be coming here. And that's an unfocused mess. New Zealand immigration policy is again being in our country, and we've done it before in our past, making these sorts of mistakes. This is not anti-immigrant. This is pro the right immigrant, the right person, the right place, in a job, and hopefully in provincial New Zealand where we need them most. And guess why that is? Because this country survives on the back of provincial New Zealand, not our big cities. Those are the facts. This is a Labour Party city. The Hawke's Bay is a Labour Party province now. Every seat is Labour. However, one thing is certain. The present Labour government has totally forgotten the Kiwi working woman, the Kiwi working man, and the Kiwi working family. And they wouldn't know manual labour if they fell over one. You know what I'm talking about. Far too many of them don't understand what it's like to be from poverty. Don't know what it smells, tastes and feels like. And they've forgotten you, and that's why their policies are so disconnected with the old Labour Party. Just a little while ago in the car, singing about a guy called Stuart Nash. Poor Stuart. He came from a background, though, of his grandfather being the Prime Minister, 57 to 1960, when Labor was a party that understood working people. Stuart's problem is the party he's in now has forgotten. And that's why when he asked the question of the Commissioner of Police, everybody attacked him. Why did he have to ask the question in the first place? He asked, surely you're going to appeal this case, aren't you? It was a horrible court outcome. Why did he have to ask the question? There was a time when everybody would understand that. But oh no, all of a sudden he sinned. Oh, that's against the Cabinet Manual. Well, it is. But he shouldn't have had to ask. Should he? And the matter should have been appealed the next day after a massive protest at the police headquarters. But no. You get people who are beaten senseless. And the offender gets 9 months home detention. It's appalling. But that's what happened here. And so just on reflection, I thought to myself, I'm sorry, Stu, but you're in the wrong party, mate. You simply are. Hawke's Bay is a Labor Party province, but boy, they've forgotten working men and women. The evidence is for this as well. 15 months ago, the Labor promised a groceries commissioner within 3 months. Why would they promise you a groceries commissioner? Because the cost of living's going through the roof and too many people can't match it. They promised you a groceries commissioner within 3 months, and they're 15 months later still advertising for one. Does this sound like they understand what poverty smells and tastes and feels like? No, it doesn't. Back in 2020, Labor promised they were, to quote them, forcing competition on supermarkets to make sure you're paying a fair price for your weekly shop. Now, do you believe that? But they said it. And just to back it up about their future plans, they said, we'll continue working to make sure you pay a fair price at the till. That's a pamphlet 3 years ago. It was only a few days ago that they're still advertising as we speak for a groceries commission they promised 15 months ago. And then they announced an inquiry into supermarket prices. In July 2023, they've promised you an inquiry into supermarket prices. Do you remember a singer called Leonard Cohen? He had a famous song called Hallelujah. Remember it? This inquiry will be as useless as the restricted terms banking inquiry, which they just announced last week as well. All this time, prices going through the roof, people struggling. Ask anybody that's trying to provide food for these food banks and what have you, and they've announced a Commerce Commission inquiry, which begs the question, if the Commerce Commission had any guts and integrity, why weren't they doing it themselves? Why did they have to have the politicians to tell them? Come to think of it, why are we employing you when you're not doing your job? Because they're all on a better salary than most of you, I can tell you now. Living high on the hog, as they say, in possibly Wellington. You know, this inquiry will be as useless as the restricted terms banking inquiry that was announced also. And it just shows you that these are last electoral gasps or breaths or puffs designed to deceive you into believing that they are doing something. And the banks and supermarkets, let me tell you, are not shaking at their knees, are they? Did you see all the bankers come out and say, oh, this is terrible? They didn't say a thing. Guess why? It's as lame as a duck. If it was, they'd have been ringing everybody up. This can't be right, this can't be fair. But they're not shaking in their knees. The bank inquiry is only into retail or personal banking. See how restricted it is? It's an inquiry that you have when you're not having an inquiry. It reminds you, doesn't some of you, I'll rephrase that, it reminds people of going to the toilet. True, this sort of inquiry. First of all, there's a long sitting. Then there's a loud report. And then they'll drop everything. Ladies and gentlemen, Hawke's Bay is not Auckland. But you've heard of Auckland Light Rail, haven't you? You've heard it ad nauseum. When Cyclone Gabriel damage needs to be fixed now, Labor is still arguing for its hopeless light rail in Auckland, now heading towards $30 billion. Remember we said at the start, the cost all over this country for the Auckland weather event and other weather events and Cyclone Gabriel was between $4 and $14 billion. This is heading towards $30 billion and they're still arguing for it. Now, when we were there, we stopped their light rail on the basis that it was rubbish, not costed, not fiscally sound, and a gross waste of money. And we will stop it again, if you give us a chance to. We will spend some of that money helping fix up the Hawke's Bay. Last week it emerged that the government's recent housing program, as you know, is way below and way behind target. All this shows is that you've got ministers who don't know what they're doing. I can recall former ministers who were on top of their job, were respected from different political parties, capable, know what they're doing. Now, you've got housing targets where they're boasting of a performance that's 93% failed. Remember what the housing target was? 100,000 houses. And we're halfway there, past halfway there, and they haven't even got a fraction of them. And all they're saying, oh yeah, but no, but the other houses are being built. They are, by private individuals, but not by this government. And by the way, it includes Labor and Green Party members who want to introduce a wealth tax where homeowners will be paying $25,000 a year, that's the median average now, will be paying a $25,000 a year on assessed capital gains tax every year, whether they have sold their house or not. And if you're retired with a house that's worth between 800 or 100 and 1.2 or 1.5 million, how do you think you're going to handle that? But that's what the policy is that the Green and other parties are campaigning on, to bring in a capital gains tax like that. And dare I say it, there are so many people who are retired who will simply go broke. But the policy's out there as we speak. There are a lot of people in this room, I say, who will be affected by this. But ladies and gentlemen, can I say that when this economy in our country is in trouble, and many people here have a good memory of it, whenever the economy's been in trouble in the past, the other parties have gone straight for the young people and the old people, or the seniors. They've done it over and over again. How do I know? Because I've been here a long time and I've seen them do it over and over again. Go straight for the young and straight for the elderly. Not the ones in between who are working, but the young and the elderly. And we, as a party, never have. We brought in free doctors for under 14-year-olds, free doctor visits. We're the ones that gave wage parity to primary schools because we thought it was wrong that they were paid not on qualifications but on the size of the shoes of the pupils in front of them. We brought that in. And we're the ones that took the minimum wage to where it is today, not the Labor Party. And if any Labor Party person wants to argue that, go and look what they campaigned on 2017 versus what we campaigned on. We said these wages are too low. You've got to take them up much higher because we are never going to keep people in this country if they're going to earn 35% more in Australia the day after we've trained them. We're the ones that said that because we believe in a proper configurated tax policy where businesses can thrive and workers can survive and be at the top of the world. as we once were. As we once were when some of you were alive, when the Minister for Labour knew all 29 unemployed people in New Zealand. Not 1,000 or 2,900, just 29. That's how good we were. When we had people in Parliament, most of whom hadn't been to university. Is there a pattern here? They're overeducated and underexperienced. We got far too many people in Parliament whose whole learning from politics is the university union. Now, if you've been to university, you'll know what a circus that is. With all the voices always there all the time, and all the rest of us are trying to get qualified and get out of there and get a job. Back to where we were. We gave pay parity to primary school teachers. We supported apprenticeships and the employment of young New Zealanders before any other people in the world. Is our policy. For decades, the other parties have attacked seniors in this country, and many of you know it. They say, all the rest of them say, that we cannot afford to have people retiring at 65 years of age. And anybody says that has never done any physical work in their life. Anybody says that has never done any hard graft in their life. Because many bodies are broken well before they're 65. If you've worked hard and you've seen them. When the percentage of super costs in New Zealand, they say that when the percentage of super costs in New Zealand will not reach the levels of other first world countries until 40 years from now. Super is about 5.1% of GDP. Some countries at 7, 8, 9%. We won't get there until 40 years from now. And that's not the important issue either. When we get there, if we're running a sound, smart, brilliant economy, we'll be able to afford it. And whilst I'm at it, if over 65 people stop doing all the work they're doing in this country, including voluntary work, this country would collapse tomorrow. And you need to be respected for it. And super affordability is about one key factor, running a high-performing economy, not a third world one. Those who believe the super age should be moved up are admitting that they have no plan for a performing economy. And every other political party has argued for the super age to be increased, to be moved up. And that statement by itself is admission. They have no idea how to run an economy. Because why is it that the retirement age in Japan is, guess how old that is? 60. Yes, madam, you're right. Sir, you're right. 60. That's what happens with a country like that who knows how to run an economy, does something dramatic. And, of course, Japan, of course, has one primary part of that, their economic plan. It's called Japan First. Not second or third, it's first. And that small country is the geographic size of New Zealand. But look where they are in the world. Now, I'm not saying take you back to 60, but I'm not moving it from 65 because, frankly, we have no need to if we run a sound economy. You know, only one party has looked after seniors over the last 3 decades, and that party is irrefutably New Zealand First. If you doubt that, can you remember the surtax? They brought in the surtax under Roger Douglas at 80 cents in the dollar for any super you were getting if you had any other savings at all. And National, of which at the time I was a member, campaigned on getting rid of it. No ifs, no buts, no maybes. And instead of getting rid of it under Ruth Richardson, put it up to 92 cents in the dollar. And the whole thing, the party collapsed. There were the rows. You should have been in the caucus and the cabinet. The blazing rows. We promised to get rid of it, and you just sold them down the drain for the second time. And that was the beginning of the end. And that's how we got MMP. Or have you all forgotten? And then, to top it off, they took super from 65% down to 60%. Didn't they? Well, who got rid of the surtax, ladies and gentlemen? If anybody's doubting what was being said from this stage, we got rid of the surtax. And then we took the super not back to 65, but in law to 66%. And then brought in the gold card and the winter energy payments and a whole lot of other things like the hearing aid subsidies and all the rest. And we'll do much more. And all I'm saying to some of the people in this country who are over 65 are getting near there, be careful who you vote for next time. Or better still, be wise. Put your money where you can be certain of the outcome, not people who make one promise, but when it comes to the other record of performance, they're like a very bad used car salesman. A lot of pre-sales talk, no after-sales delivery. And you can't afford it. You know, in the last few years, the government has hired 15,000, that's 15,000 new public servants. Now, anybody here in the Hawke's Bay notice any dramatic improvement? I can't believe you're laughing. 15,000. That's massive. That money should have been spent on health and education systems and doctors and nurses and critical people we need. Not 15,000 new public servants, many of whom are engaged in purely spin and propaganda. Do you remember a man called Peter Fraser? No, some of you might. Hollyoaks, some of you might. They both had 5 people in their office. Now the Prime Minister got 65. Did you say G's? No, not G's, 65 of them. 65. Doing what? Well, they're overseeing all the other ministers just in case they foul up. Well, how about getting ministers to know what the hell they're doing in the first place, and you won't need these people over there, and maybe we can have far more specialist doctors, nurses, and all sorts of people we need in our country. But 15,000 of them? In the education sector, politicians are extolling the virtues of education on one hand, while taking away the funding to make it work on the other. My party, New Zealand First, is going to seriously increase education spending, ladies and gentlemen, but for education, not indoctrination. We're going to stop half this rubbish that students don't need and give them the basics they do need. And let them make up their mind when they're adults what they want to do with the rest of their lives. We want them to have a chance to get the tools to get on the escalators of life and go as far as possible in education, like some of us were lucky enough to do. And we aim to pay our medical specialists, including nurses, competitive wages that other first world economies like we once did. And we're going to get rid of the billions of dollars of waste on nice-to-have projects and spend it on must-have projects. We don't need light rail. We didn't need a cycleway over the Auckland Harbour Bridge that cost $54 million, truly, on analysis. It didn't stay. It only lasted a month and a half, but that's what it cost. You want to see what happened the other day? Well, he's not there anymore. The Minister of Wood is the Transport Minister. Went up to Auckland the other day, and this is mind-boggling stuff, but he announced 5 different proposals to cross a new crossing for the Waitemata Harbour. 5 different proposals, all interchangeable. They don't have to be an architect or an engineer to work. Something's gone wrong here. How can they all be interchangeable? And they're all linked into, guess what? Light rail, which hasn't even started. And did I say to the media, how come he didn't get laughed out of town? But no, they put it in the headlines, as though it was a serious proposal. And if you're sitting down here, guess who's going to pay for this farce? Feeling good now? I bet you want to go down to some of the wineries after this very tough meeting, because you're hearing the facts, but this is astonishing stuff. When we start doing that and incentivizing taxes, what we've got to do to grow our productivity, our wealth and exports, and our IT capacity, then the sooner we will start balancing the nation's books again, which we haven't done since 1972. And there's a stack of people here that weren't alive when that happened last. That's sad in a way. But we have to have smarter tax policy to get far more added value out of our economy, dare say it in the Hawke's Bays as well. And that's what we must do in the future. We have got to be more clever with the work we are doing and develop a culture of innovation, not with more hours worked, but smarter hours work. We work the second longest hours in the OECD. But we're not going anywhere fast. We work the second longest hours in the OECD. So please don't say our people are lazy. It's just that our people have got the wrong leaders who don't understand how a sound economy, like a sound business, is run. You know, New Zealand First is going to ensure that there's an honest inquiry, because it's important now, into the COVID years. You remember what happened when the people went to Wellington to have a talk to the government or any political party on this matter of COVID? Many of them were not vaccine deniers. Many of them had been vaccinated, and some of them triple vaccinated. But they went there because their businesses were going bust and their workers were out of a job and things were absolutely hopeless. And yet they got down there to find every political party had signed a pact not to talk to them. This is breathtaking, ladies and gentlemen. I don't care whether you are for or against vaccines, and I'm a triple vaccinated person myself. People have a right to have a different point of view. Right? We're going to ensure that there's an honest inquiry, not the cover-up that's going on now. And whilst we're at it, why isn't the inquiry going on now? No, they're going to have it after the election. Did you not know that? No, they're going to hold it after the election. Now, there can only be one reason for that, because I don't want you to know any of the emerging truth on the way through. And I don't care what a specialist doctor or specialist scientist you are, no one's exactitude on science is that good. Science is always about questioning whether people are right, learning and improving, building on understanding. And when we heard that there was a podium of truth and all these things were honest, we thought there's something dramatically wrong here. We're not telling New Zealanders the truth. And when you go for an operation, as you well know, you're entitled to, before you give informed consent, to be informed of the risk. And people weren't. I'm not anti-vaccine. How could I be? I saw the effects over my youth of the Spanish flu when the level of deaths in Maori were 8 to 9 times greater than the Europeans because of their lack of immunity almost 100 years ago. And my father and all his family dying off like flies. And so then in 1924, over 100 years ago, there was a man who arrived who was the Minister of Health of all things, and of all things he was a Maori. His name was Maui Pomare, and he brought modern medicine to Maori. I'm not anti-vax, but I'm anti-people telling the public statements which are not true. That if you take this, as Jacinda Ardern said, you won't get COVID. Remember I'm saying that? And if you want to hear that, come to the podium of truth. This is the only place where you get honesty. Meanwhile, we're sitting there thinking, we can't stand this. This is just wrong. It's misleading people. Look, we're not anti-vaccine, but we're pro-truth, and people should have been told the truth about the possible side effects so they could make an informed choice and not being the victims of bullying, sadistic gaslighting from the podium of truth, and those who went along with the government's claim of having, quotes, the full science. Every student here knows there's no full science. That's why we're always constantly learning. What do you think the theory of experientialism means? It means no one person has the answer. People build on previous people's answers. And that's the magnitude of life. Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to ensure that there is an honest inquiry and the truth gets out, because the future generation is entitled to a better deal than you and I got. You know, safety and security is a major for this country, and there's just too many cities and towns, dare I say, places in this country where people just don't feel safe. The daily reports of court decisions are cause for growing alarm, because there is concern not for the victim, but the offender. In fact, every week there are appalling cases of people being damaged for life. with virtually no consequences for the offender, such as 9 months home detention on so many of these cases where a person has been damaged for the rest of their life. Now, where's the justice and accountability in that? Just yesterday, a number of Black Power members in Hawera were sentenced to a few months home detention after beating a middle-aged man senseless and stabbed him, hit him with a tire iron, unprovoked, just for wearing the wrong colour when waiting for his McDonald's order. Can I just say, if you're a Maori or somebody with a Maori in your background, this is the kind of image that is portrayed as being you and us at night on the 6 o'clock news. And some of us have had a guts full of it. That's not us. That's not the people that came across the Pacific all those hundreds of years ago or went off to war. But night after night, this is happening. 13 Black Power members were charged with a range of offences, including injuring with intent and assault. They all received bumper discounts to their sentences, with most getting a holiday with a few months home detention. Ladies and gentlemen, I don't care what you think the judicial system is. They are not above Parliament, and they're not above you. And I know that you don't think that's fair, and I know that Parliament has depicted it not to be fair. And so we need to ensure that the system does work and that victims do get justice. This week, sad, different story, but a 18 and 20-year-old were discharged without conviction after shooting arrows into a pet bull and steer, with both animals suffering miserably and later dying. And they were discharged without conviction. Imagine if you were the owner of those animals, caring for them, and then you find that, and that there are no consequences. This is the state of our judicial system. Too often, no accountability, no justice, no deterrent, no real punishment. Now, is there any wonder our crime stats have gone through the roof? Offending will not stop at the current levels until it's faced with the serious intention and resource from central government that crime will be punished. New Zealand First means to end the mindless excuses of blaming everything on colonisation, racism, poverty, bad upbringings, not being suckled by mum, and creating a culture of offending being the victims of society. That's what they say. Given all those reasons for those offences, we are going to focus on bringing justice for the real victims of crime. And that's why we went out in 2017 to massively increase the police numbers. Not Labor, we did. And we trained 2,338 extra frontline police in just over 3 years. But too many were leaving because of COVID and couldn't stand the job any longer. And many of those were Maori, wanting to serve the country where there's one law for all. And we're also going to ensure that under the Terrorism Suppression Act, gangs are designated as terrorists, because the biggest victims as I said, the biggest victims in this world of gang life are Maori, sadly, themselves. And we know it. If Queensland and Western Australia can do this, why can't we? And let's not give any credence to the argument that somehow this is against their constitutional rights. We say the rights of law-abiding citizens come first. And to have constitutional rights, there must be constitutional obligations. And many, including gang members, are flouting our laws right in front of the police, and you've been seeing it night after night on television. Running amok and at the centre of drug dealing that is so destructive to our social fabric. This cannot go on any longer. You find me Maori mothers who don't back what I'm saying here. They know this is massively destructive of their people and indeed all people. And we're going to make it clear to the gangs that they have no future in their present membership. We're going to put them to work in the same way that we all have to work. Receiving benefits comes with responsibilities, where they will no longer take with one hand and ignore the law with the other. It's called a social contract. Do you remember that? Isn't it curious? When the Labour Party in the 1935-38 government brought in the family benefit, guess who they didn't give it to? No, the males. They didn't trust them. These guys have been around. They gave it only to the women. And wouldn't you? Sorry, guys. I know we're going to get the best return here from, and that's what we've got to do with our policies. Don't be politically correct, be politically smart. You know, the Labor government has been secretly working on socially re-engineering our whole society. They justify this as arising from the commitments to the United Nations that the Maori Party Act and John Key made. They signed up to the United Nations Declaration for the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. That's John Key did. When Helen Clark and I, as Foreign Minister in 2007, would not, because we said that UN declaration is contrary to the sovereignty of our law in our country. We said that in 2007, and 3 years later, there's John Key and these other parties signing up to it. But they'll all come here and tell you that on this issue they can be trusted. Well, if you believe that, ladies and gentlemen, you believe anything. I'm putting up the record here. As the Foreign Minister said to Helen Clark, you can't possibly sign this up. That means that our law is now subservient to what they say. And we are one of the great democracies that started in 1854 and was the most comprehensive democracy in 1893 when women got the vote before any other country. And she agreed. So how come National and ACT and Maori Party went along and did that? And Peter Dunn and everybody else who comes and tells you something else about this issue. But that's what happened. Yet 3 years later, those parties all signed up, as I said, to an unelected voice to the Auckland super city. Now, I'm here down in Ngāti Kaungunu, aren't I? A whole lot live in Auckland. A whole lot of Ngāpui live in Auckland as well. But we got no say in what goes in Auckland these days. That's all down to Ngāti Whātua, an unelected group on the Auckland super city. And John Key and the ACT Party did that, under a guy called Rodney Hyde. Or if you're in the South Island, where the mass majority of Maori happen to be not from Ngai Tahu, you don't get a say at all, do you? And those are the facts. But they sign up to the super city and replace the New Zealand first foreshore and seabed legislation, which we brought on here 2004, 2005, to ensure that everybody had a right, would get a right, but not those who didn't have one. They got rid of our legislation and brought in the Marine and Coastal Areas Act, which now sees over 600 claims around this country, mainly iwi against iwi, and up to $300,000 is being paid for on each case by guess who? Yes, you. And I'm telling you that I could walk down the street here and I'll barely find a Maori who's got any idea why those claims are being made and never asked for them in the first place. Because that's not what Maori want. The mass majority of Maori, you know, by Labour's own definition, are on the general roll with the rest of us. Despite spending millions of dollars in the latest enrolment process, ordinary Maori have voted with their feet. They want to be on the general roll, the single franchise, with 95% of the rest of the country. And that's a fact. You know what the qualification is? Up till 1975, the qualification was you had to be half Maori or more to be on a Maori roll. And then Labour in 75 changed that to be just recite an ancestor, which means that dilution today could be 1 part in 512, or 1/64th, or 1/8. And all these people are shouting out, "My tēnā rangatiratanga." You know, they're all doing it. Got 1 32nd Maori. Oh, I'm a Maori. Well, look, ladies and gentlemen, some of us are not going to rat on the other side of our heritage. We might be Scots, but we're proud of it. Nobody's perfect, right? Gives you a natural suntan and a desire to save money. But why do they want to rat on the other heritage? Why do you want to rat on your Irish, your Yugoslav, your Croatian, your Dalmatian, your Welsh, or your English, dare I say it, whatever your heritage? Why are people ratting on that? Because they're encouraged to, they're paid to in some cases look at one of their parents and say, I wish, in fact, the rest of my life, because of the dictatorial view of the government and others, I wish to disown you. What a disgrace. Well, some of us are not doing that because we're proud of the fact that we're New Zealanders first with a different background. You know, Rob Muldoon once asked this commander of the armed forces, General Pornanga, how many Maori have you got in the army? You know what he said? Prime Minister, we only have soldiers in the army. Did you like that? Well, I do. That tells me somebody sees what the purpose of is being a part of a country and being part of a nation and being a citizen where they're all the same, regardless of our background. Have you heard of the 3 waters, now 10 waters? Which will see your water being controlled by 10 bodies, 50% of whom must be local unelected Maori, but requiring a 75% decision proviso, which means local unelected Maori can veto any and every proposal. And if you're Maori here and you're thinking, what does this guy know about it? Let me tell you, I know a bit about it. I started off in one of the biggest land cases in this country's history against the Crown, a Labour Party government, and the council, and we won. And countless other cases, West Coast leases, Mount Hikurangi. Do you want a list of things we did when they were right to do? But we're not standing by when this goes on, when they say that you've got no interest in water, and they have. Chris Hipkins said it's not co-governance and never has been. The Minister in charge, Kyron McNulty, says it is co-governance. And he said, Maori have a special interest in water. Like you don't? And if you're Maori in the South Island, you've got no interest in water? If you're not Ngai Tahu, or if you're Ngāti Kaungunu and living in Auckland, you've got no interest in water? Of course you have. And one thing we do know, that in the Maori world, it's a gift from God. It's for everybody. When did we ever in the Maori world conceptually think we owned that? And how can any of this be fair? And now they are forcing all departments and every quasi-government group into complying with their version of the Treaty of Waitangi. It's revisionism. They are changing local government with Maori wards, and the disgrace of that is that if anybody in the Maori world wants to be equal, then there's a chance to be. My brother headed the Northern Regional Authority. There's a Maori that's mayor for Rotorua. A Chinese was a mayor for Gisborne for a long time. There's been 3 Asian people being the mayor of Wanganui, of Dunedin. People can make it if they want to. And if you really want equality, the last thing you want is paternalism. That's what some of us are saying to our Maori brethren. Paternalism is the worst sort of inverse racism. We can get there by ourselves. Ask the women's rugby team. Come on. They were facing a hopeless. They were so badly organised, but in a very short time, they even went and got some men to help. And in a very short time, they took women's rugby so far, and it's admirable. And I was talking to Graham Henry the other day, that I played rugby with one time, years ago, and said to him that. He said, no, it wasn't us. I said, no, but it was a great thing to see everybody in a crisis pitched in, and it was successful. And that's wonderful. They are setting up Maori health authorities with veto rights over the health system. They're giving Maori control over all aspects of water, as I said. Replacing English names whether appropriate or not. Changing our country's name. By the way, you got a river here that hasn't got a very good name. Tutai Kuri is the name, isn't it? I thought somebody might have changed that name by now. Renaming all government departments. Ladies and gentlemen, I don't care what the government department says when I'm sick. I want to know the doctor or nurse going to fix me. I don't want to lecture and treat you Waitangi. I want to know, will they fix up the child or the person I've brought along? And where did they think they could change the country's name? Because it was never Aotearoa. That's a name from French Polynesia. Go and tell the South Island, why is your cousins in Ngaitau so silent? They know that Te Waipo Nam was their name, it ain't Aotearoa, so why are they so silent? Or are they scared that they might have the water turned off if they complained? Come on, it's time to stand up and have some integrity. And they're giving the Waitangi Tribunal superior status to Parliament. A finding there must be mandatory. This is a joke. They want the compulsory teaching of Māori to year 10 in schools. Now look, some of us were there at the time that Kohanga Royal was first funded. I was in the caucus for the first time it ever happened. In fact, I'm going to take a bit of time. I know it's been a bit long speech, but I'm going to tell you what happened. Because unlike what they said when they were celebrating just last year, they said it happened in 1982. No, it didn't. It happened in 1980. Some of us remember with far more greater clarity. They didn't want to own up to the fact. But what happened was, Whina Cooper came down with a whole lot of Māori male leaders, all too scared to talk to Muldoon, so they got Whina to do the talking. Do you know that? True story. They all went into Muldoon's office, and she puts to him the need to fund the Māori language in schools. And she wouldn't have been going 4.5 minutes when Muldoon looked at her and said yes. So they realised, when she went a bit long, then also she realised, hang on, the conversation's over. What do you do now? They thought they were going to be about there for an hour, so they got up and just all went out. Now, if you know Whina Cooper like I do, she couldn't help herself. She was outside and came back, and through the door she put her head and said, Mr. Muldoon, what if I asked you for twice as much? You know what he said to her? But you didn't, Whina. See? She would have got it if she'd have set her sights high. But that's the thing, we're not against the Māori language. The flexibility of intellectual training is great for the flexibility of the training of minds. The language is great like that. But to make these statements is to say, no matter where there's only one person in the class, in the whole school in some cases, we're going to do it anyway. This is a waste of taxpayers' money in that context. Why don't they focus on their core business? And they want Māori control of the whole dock estate. And much, much more, which they've been secretly working on. These policies were prepared by Labour in secret, and there's no historic justification for them, which is why they've set out to rewrite and reconstruct history. To get where these politicians are taking us, they deal in lies, including these 4 claims. That European arrival ruined the peaceful paradise of Māori. You don't have to go very far, coming from Ngāpuhi down south, before you know what a lot of crap that is. In fact, it's more peaceful now, but that's the truth of it all. They say that European arrival ruined the peaceful paradise of Māori, that the treaty saw Māori begin a partnership with Queen Victoria, 3, that the treaty was not about Māori ceding sovereignty, and 4, that the treaty meant Māori self-government. Now stop for a moment and ask yourself whether you're Māori or non-Māori. Can any of these 4 statements be remotely true? Every iwi history in this country of the intertribal wars makes the Māori Garden of Eden a complete myth. We know it. More acutely, all of you who know how nasty it was when Ngāpuhi got the rifles first. If no one in Britain or the UK or the whole British Empire was in partnership with the Crown on the 5th of February 1840, then how could it be constitutionally true that Māori were, 2 days later on the 7th of February 1840. The fact is, Maori ceded sovereignty to the Crown when they signed the treaty. The chiefs back then, including the chief from my tribe, my iwi, said so, as did many leading Maori later, like Sir Apana Ngata, Sir Maui Pomare and Sir Peter Buck. Only today's elite, power-hungry Maori and their cultural fellow travellers refute that these geniuses are right and then put in their own mistaken history and call it fact. By the way, if you're Maori here, you know what tino rangatiratanga means, don't you? It means the chief's word is gospel. And that's it. It means the chief's word is gospel. Now, if that was true, and you had all these different chiefs, then how on earth could you possibly have a circumstance of co-government back in 1840? Because the moment that one chief differed from the other one, that doctrine is down the tube straight away. The elite argument does not stand the slightest of scrutiny under their description of co-government pre-1840 Maori as we know it was, and we know it in the beaches right next to where we live in the beach up where I come from, Ngātiwai, which means people of the sea, not all at sea, people of the sea. All those funeral grounds, we know it's true. And every ordinary Maori knows it, and there's the rub. You know, sadly, ordinary Maori want safe, affordable homes. Ready access to health care should somebody, hopefully not them, but in their family need it. The educational escalators for their young to be open so they can go as far as they like to go. And first world wages, those four things are what Maori want, and you know what? That's what every ordinary New Zealander wants. Those four things before anything else. And it's those four policies that New Zealand First is committed to delivering on, no matter what race you are, what church you are, and what gender you are. That's why the party is called New Zealand First. Ladies and gentlemen, this is a critical time in our country's history. If we don't get the political outcome right, the economic and social outcome will keep getting and being wrong. Remember, under MMP, you have two votes. One for a local electorate, political party candidate, and one for the political party of your choice or the party vote. This country, our country, is at an inflection point, and a change in government is critical. But that's, of course, it must be to a much better government than we've got now, and not just a bunch who are saying it's our turn now. We don't want Tweedledum and Tweedledee now. We want something far better. You know, there won't be a new world in the morning, as the song goes, on the 15th of October. There are no easy solutions, no shortcuts, but a number of years of hard work and, dare I say it, many sacrifices that we have to make now. This is an election where voters want to know who can best help them through the tough times ahead. And one thing that the last 3 years have proven is that certainty, common sense and experience is critical to good government. On their own, since the election 2020, the Labour Party has been an absolute mess, with ministers going down like proverbial flies day after day. New Zealand First is a party born of ordinary New Zealanders. We understand the economic challenges facing New Zealanders, and we don't have extremist policies on either side of the divide that have never worked in the history of any country. Ladies and gentlemen, voters don't believe in the idea that we can spend our way out of the current crisis. We know that we have to earn our way out of it, and that the endeavour, the enterprise and the sweat and sacrifice of a province like the Hawke's Bay and other provinces is now going to be critical. In 2020, in August, that's 3 years ago, almost 3 years ago, I said this: the worst prospect for you is a red-green government or Labour governing alone. The result, in our view, given the impracticality of so many ideas being floated now, will still be being paid for by your grandchildren, ends of quotes. Now, nobody wants to say, I told you so, didn't I? But we darn well did. And 3 years ago, just before the last election, that's proven to be right. This party, New Zealand First, is the insurance voters need to avoid an ideological lurch in either direction. We are a party that has, for the past 30 years, since our formation, put New Zealanders first. And why at these meetings, which are packed all around the country, are there nobody from the metropolitan media? Television New Zealand, which you own, or Radio New Zealand, which you own? And the answer is because they're corrupt and been bought out. But they're not trying to shut me down, they're trying to shut you down. Make no bones about it. Certainly common sense and experience is desperately needed in New Zealand now, even more so after the coming election. You know, politics is a strange business. It's the capacity to do so much damage to people so quickly, but conversely it also has the possibility to do so much good faster than any profession that I know. And we need to be unwavering in our work to save our country from here on in. And if you believe in that, then our future is certain. Democracy will prevail. But it is, as Elvis sang, it's now or never. We oppose co-governance. We oppose Three Waters takeover. We oppose our country's name being changed. We oppose separatism in policy and in law. And we support policies based on need, not race. We support the rule of law where everyone is equal before it and everybody's vote is worth the same. We support the right of free speech, and that means we support the right of New Zealanders to say, I disagree, and not be mandated out of existence, not being mandated into being a second-class citizen and losing their jobs, careers, or their right to make a living. We support the right of New Zealanders to disagree with government policy and not to be punished for it. That's what freedom means. And we are never, in New Zealand First, going to work in Parliament with any political party whose policies threaten these fundamental values. We're asking you to give us your party vote. And with it, together, you'll win, your family will win, the Hawke's Bay will win, and your country will win. Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, this is question time now, please. It's always amazing. It's a question, not a speech. Don't need a dialogue. I'll repeat the speech, I'll repeat the question. So the shorter you make it, the easier I'll be able to repeat it, because it'll be more likely I'll be accurate if you keep it brief. And as you know, brevity is the soul of wit. First question. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Would you, under any circumstances, form a coalition with Labour?
No. Look, I'm not a biased person. You go and ask Helen Clark whether I can be trusted. Go and ask Michael, he's not alive now, but ask Michael Cullen and all those guys whether Winston Peters can be trusted. But I trusted the Labour Party, and they lied to me, and I can prove it. Not once, a lot of times. So the answer is no. I'm sorry about that. One over here and then one over there. Yes, sir.
Yeah, why are the police stations in Napier and Hastings shut down like an office, shut at 6 at night, and you can't go to them if you're in trouble? This is the police stations in Hastings and Napier.
Look, first of all, that's news to me. I can't believe that Napier and Hastings have police stations that are shut at night.
Often, there's only 4 of them on to cover the whole of Hawke's Bay.
The gentleman wants to know, I should have repeated the question. The question was, well, the first one shocked me so much, I didn't repeat that either. He said, will you go into government with Labor after the next election? I said, definitely no, because the last lot lied to me. Not like Helen Clark. No, the last lot just lied. The question is, why is the Napier and Hastings police station closed after 6 o'clock at night? I've got no idea why that is the case. But I tell you something, if you're not screaming blue murder about that, then they'll carry on doing it. It needs to be open. I've looked at the stats here. The breaches of the law are serious here. So we'll do something about it. Yes, sir.
The WEF.
Sorry?
Will you opt out of WEF?
The world. Will you opt out of the World Economic Fund? The World Health Organization? No, I will not advocating opt out of the World Health Organization. I'll advocate them telling them where to stick their latest set of rules. Right? On the basis that we're a sovereign nation and we don't need them to order from their international pandemics results in our country. We'll handle that ourselves. It's just that recent change needs to be stopped right here, right now. One here, then one over there. Yes, sir.
Do you believe it's possible that we can bring democratic society back to New Zealand despite where we are going right now?
Do I believe that we can bring democratic society back to New Zealand despite where we're going right now? And my answer is, well, if you do something about it, a whole lot of people get off their backside. Yes, I do. You're saying we get tried to get shut down? Haven't you heard that song? I get knocked down and get back up again. You're never going to keep me down, for goodness sake. You've got to have the attitude. You've got to get them to know they're not going to win. And you're going to have to not be defeatist. We will win this campaign. Make no bones about it. I have, just the other day, we saw this poll out there. It didn't have my party's name on it.
I saw that. That's appalling.
Did you see that? What chance have we got of coming out in the polls if the name's not there in the first place? Yes, sir.
With over 20 years experience, there are certain issues I cannot talk to you about. Because it doesn't fit with the narrative of the podium of truth. What does your party propose to do to protect me from being deregistered and being able to turn up to work tomorrow to serve my patients? Please give it to the nurses. They get paid twice the amount in Australia.
Now, remember what I said about the question? What was it again? How am I going to protect you from being mandated? Yes.
By my regulatory body.
How are you going to protect me and others like me from answering responsible inquiries that do not comply with the narrative from the podium of truth and other professional dictates, which I'm astonished that the medical profession has gone along with? You're quite right. Well, first thing, sir, I'm going to make sure you get your job back and not be mandated out of it. Yeah.
Fit with the narrative.
Well, sir, I'll tell you, let's not have an argument about this. You're talking to the one guy that went the distance with my colleague when we got trespassed off Parliament being a terrorist. Everybody else didn't go to court, but no. So listen, I know you had to protest, but you didn't put your hand in your pocket and go to the wire. We did and won. Now, sir, can I just finish it? No, finish. Finish. I'm not here to argue with you. Sir, I agree with you. I say you should have your job back. You should be compensated for it, as I believe all those nurses who were wrongly mandated should have been compensated as well. It is not our policy. It is their policy, and that's why I'm such a disagreement with it, because I do not believe for a moment that in the fullness of the time, the known science and when it's out, will remotely justify the pervasive action they took against you and those nurses. That's my party's position. But, sir, I go to the wired form principles when I think something's gone wrong. And that's why I expect you to believe me. That's why I expect you to believe me. Look, hang on. Come on, son. You know that this will not be work as question time if you can take the whole time up. Will it? Yeah, at the very back. Yes, sir.
The doctor's asking about censorship. I think medical professionals are being censored. And how are you going to protect them? So they can
Well, I'm astonished. Look, you answer. Medical professions being censored, and how are you going to protect it? I'm astonished you're asking me because I've given enough interviews to let people know that something shocking is going on at the moment, that people are being defamed and traduced who are asking honest questions with proper scientific endeavour, and I haven't been one of them. I've looked at, for example, the incidence of COVID outfall in Europe and the UK and, dare I say it, the USA, compared with, say, a country like Papua New Guinea. How can their theories be right if those outcomes are correct? And yet there are big studies out now emerging every day. But I saw at the time, I saw serious epidemiologists who didn't agree with the podium of truth just being shut down. I was against it then and I'm against it now. And I expect you to believe me because, as I say, these are just cheap words. But I've been to the wire at great cost or risk to prove it personally with one of my colleagues, when all the rest just took it. And don't get upset when the facts are put before you, sir. Yes, madam, with the glasses.
To no censorship comes to people, scientists and those speaking out about climate change.
You're very lucky to be here, because 5 years ago, Greta Thunberg said that the world was going to end last week. She did. That's what you put there. Now, you know, can I just say, I've been to have a look at Esk Valley, but Esk Valley happened like that in 1938. And I don't know if you know this, but the world's worst measured tsunami there's ever been was 500 metres, and it happened in 1958 off the coast of Alaska. But we're being terrorised here to believe all these things are new. But as I say, Greta, 2018, said the world was going to end last week, but that tweet's been pulled down. Now, let me just say for my part, I think good environmentalism is good economics. I'm anti-pollution, I'm anti-rubbish, and I think we should be doing a whole lot more in terms of cleaning up our environment. But the terrorising of young children today and young students into believing some of these extremist theories is just not right. And while I'm at it, and while I'm at it, our cost on the carbon footprint is about 0.0001, and if you look at China and India and Russia and others, China is building 2 coal-fired stations a week now. They'll build 100 this year. So whatever we do, if we don't get them on side, we're just terrorising our economy and damaging our future and our existence. And I hope in this campaign we won't get people saying, oh, these people are climate change deniers. We're not. We're just not stupid. Yes, madam.
Reopen Marsden Point.
Yes.
You know something? If I thought it was possible to structurally reopen Marsden Point tomorrow, I would, because we, in a supply crisis, have only one resource, and that's Marsden Point. Otherwise, in a supply crisis, you've got to keep all your essential industries going. Your doctors, your nurses, your ambulances, your fire brigades. We could keep it going. We would have the capacity to keep it going. And Megan Woods, the Minister of Energy, is talking balderdash on this matter. But here's the point. We should have told the Aussies, who got control of that utility, we don't like jingoistic behaviour here. You can naff off. Truly, That's a utility that's critical to our economy. And right, the things that you saw the other day was that now our aircraft fuel supply is threatened. We're not as safe as we think. We had a government making decisions because they were naive and extreme, and they were anti certain fossil fuels before we had a replacement, and we haven't got it yet. So would I open it? Yes. Why would I, amongst other things? Because I'm from up north. And it's right next to the best port, the deepest port in the country. And it's critical for our ongoing utilities if ever there's a supply crisis. But make no about it. I'd never let the Aussies done that. Start putting concrete down there. Well, that's one of the. But that's some of the collateral damage. We haven't got the decent stuff now, and we're putting inferior stuff on. As you saw north of Walkworth recently, about a year ago, what happened when the rain came, all the stuff was sticking to the cars. It was unbelievable. Yes, madam.
What would you propose to do differently? Should there be another cyclone? We had a lot of looting going on, and it was really the gangs. Well, I shouldn't say gangs, but there were a lot of criminal activity, and we got no extra help. We were demanding the defence force come in and close off roads, etc. What would you propose?
The lady's asking in an event, dare say hopefully it never happens, of another Cyclone Gabriel where looting was going on. What would you propose to do in the future? Well, we're going to have to get the military out there to make sure that get the military out there to enforce the law. And here's the great thing. Most of them are Maori. They'll be making sure that doesn't happen. Right? Yes, sir.
Just out of curiosity, on the cost of living crisis, how do we start fixing a cost of living crisis when it's manufactured by corporations, i.e. petrol, banks, and food, when those are my three biggest bills in my household?
Well, that isn't fascinating. The Australians have had 5 inquiries into their own banks. And we haven't had a decent inquiry here into their banks. As though Ned Kelly can be not trusted in Australia, but he can trust him in New Zealand. It's a joke. And we are for a full-scale inquiry, not a narrow one, a full-scale inquiry, because you're being ripped off. Right? How come their most profitable business is not in Tasmania, not in Queensland, not in Western Australia? No, it's in New Zealand. Don't have to be rocket scientists to work out you're being ripped off. And when they had an inquiry in Australia into banking, they saw that billions was being ripped off the Aussies. So why would Ned Kelly do that to their own people and not to us? You're quite right. And as for the groceries inquiry, it should be started by an independent person. And by the way, if you're reading the Sunday papers, Catherine Rich, who used to be in charge of that, former National Party person, talked about the cost, on a 2-page a day, the real cost of COVID to that industry and to you. So that should be a subject for inquiry as well. And on the question of petrol, well, you've read the Seven Sisters, haven't you? They've never changed. What did the architect or the writer of capitalism, Adam Smith, say? Men of business seldom meet for food or entertainment without the conversation soon turns to a conspiracy against the public. So that's why we should do our best to make sure that we've got independent control and accountability on the supply of these critical products and costs. And until you get that, you're not going to get a fair deal. Yes, sir.
Are you interested in repealing the RMA? Because the building costs in this country have just gone through the roof.
Am I interested in repealing the RMA? Because the building costs in this country have just gone through the roof. No, sir, they've gone through the roof for the last 30 years. And it costs far too much to build in this country. In fact, in some cases, the permission costs under the RMA are costing up to 35% of the development. This is dramatically wrong. Then the second thing is your actual equipment and your supply of product costs are possibly 30 to 45% more than they should be. This is a country that grows wood cheaper than anybody else in the world. So we should have a full-scale inquiry into who's manipulating that end of the market. And as for getting rid of the RMA, well, you know who brought the RMA in, don't you? The National Party brought it in. Truly. But here's the rub. We'll always need planning laws, but they need to be practically designed to cut the cost of the consumer. And that needs to be happening at the very critical level of councils. The councils these days have got you by the throat. But it's not their fault. Parliament is making these stupid laws, and councils in many cases aren't able to enforce the rules or make them work fast enough. Have this plan. Until we get around to it, you can just wait. And waiting, one supermarket in Auckland waited 27 years. Well, you know, Moses waited 40 years and never saw the promised land, but 27 years for a permit to build a shop is outrageous. Yes, I am for a practical re-evaluation and amendment to the resource management legislation. Yes, sir.
What is your attitude towards WEF, World Economic Forum, and their policies?
What is my attitude to the World Economic Forum? Well, I would say to them, naff off. Why do you think? I'm not a globalist. I can understand what Chris Hipkins was doing with that swab guy the other day in the photograph. I'm not a globalist, I'm a nationalist. I'm for New Zealand first. Just like I go to Singapore, it's Singapore first. I go to China, it's China first. I go to Japan, it's Japan first. Come to New Zealand, oh, we're globalists. No, I'm not. My party's called New Zealand first, and I'm not interested in what he's got to say. I do not think he's got any of the solutions that we need, and I think we'll do far better by ignoring him. At the very back. Yes.
United Nations Convention Against Corruption many, many years ago, but it's a piece of legislation that sits there and does nothing. It seems to me that if we have an independent commission against corruption, then a lot of the things you're talking about might have a solution. Would you implement
The lady says we should have an independent commission against corruption because that might be the solution. Let me tell you something. I'm not going to say it today because it's part of my campaign and coming. But there are some institutions in this country that need to be exposed for how corrupt they are. And I'm going to wait a bit longer in this campaign to tell you who they are. All right? Don't you? They never thought we were going to sit down and take what they did. Now, that lady there in the dark, yes.
I was just wondering what your stance is on the 15 and 20-minute cities.
The lady asked, what's my stance on the 15 to 20-minute cities? Now, is it 15 or 20? Or is it 5 or 25? I'm going to tell you this. I'm not an expert on it. I've looked at it and I haven't got a fix on it, frankly. I can't answer you. Sorry. If you've got an answer, you tell me. So you believe it's going to happen? Oh, I see. Sorry. Well, you know what that means. There goes your freedom. There goes your privacy. You're in lockdown. I know. At the very back, yes, madam.
as a woman?
What about adult human female? I never thought in a long career that someone would get up and ask me a question like that, but they are lately. The world's gone mad. It really has, you know. It's really sad. Look, I'm from a legal background and have always had the view that the government's got no business in the nation bedrooms and live and let live. But the world's gone mad now. Instead of the mass majority of people, or the mass majority getting on with life, everybody is now on a suspicion. Everybody's been gaslit, typecast, indoctrinated, and frankly, it'll go on being that way until you decide to make a stand and say you've had a gutsful, had enough. The one up there, be fair here. This gentleman, yes, sir?
The emissions trading scheme
and particularly forestry taking over productive land. Your thoughts on those matters?
Look, forestry, it should have been a case that I'm a strong believer in a billion trees in this country, but it's the right tree in the right place. And that means native species in the right place. It means the native species that one might be there for 50, 100, 200 years. I think what happened with the plan to build a billion trees, some people just grabbed it and started shoving pines everywhere. Now, I'm not for that at all, but I am for the billion tree program and actually an extension of that, because I think it's great. If you want to talk about climate change, it's a positive initiative. But it has to be the right tree, right place, and you've got to incorporate small landowners in it to get compensated where massive gains will be made. But small landowners, you know, were left out. So there's a lot of tweaking we can do to fix that up. But I am for a how shall I put it? You know, if no native trees in this country had been ever cut down, and we started from tomorrow, none of us would have to work. We could just live on the timber alone. That's how much we lost. But no, well, my party's called New Zealand First, and I'm for New Zealand ownership. And that's what we did. We changed this business about being a foreigner being able to buy homes in New Zealand. We stopped all that in the last 3 years. Yes, at the very back.
You've already got a really good answer for this question. It's to do with the media. How are you going to fix the propaganda in the mainstream media and make journalism honest again? What are you going to do about it?
How are you going to fix the media and make journalism honest again? Well, first of all, it's very sad, because it's critical in a democracy, whether you like it or not, that there be an independent fourth estate, that there be an independent group without fear or favour printing the truth and putting out alternative views. But they should not be a bunch of fifth columnists for one political party and for another system. And that's what happened. They got bought off with a $54 million bribe. They took the money. Now, sadly, that's terribly damaging for journalism. And I've seen too many journalists I do respect who have been hurt by this here. And I think we've got to go forward in the future in a sense that whatever assistance we give to business, or dare I say it, the media, it should not come with this rotten price tag that the Labour Party asked them to comply with, which was to repeat their Treaty of Waitangi duplicitous narrative. Yes, sir.
I'd like to questions around the health, please. I got put in the hospital there for several days waiting to see the team. The team. And I waited there in the hospital, put in by my doctor for several days. And I got home after not seeing any of the team. And 2 days later, I received a letter from the hospital telling me I was no longer on the list because A, there's too many people on the list, and B, they had no money to pay for it. But yet I spent several days here sitting waiting for that letter, but I was put in hospital. What are you going to do about our crazy hospital system that's just falling over badly? And that was a good example.
The gentleman was asking a question about having personal experience of trying to get a treatment at the hospital and being on a waiting list and just going on and on and on. And you would have seen, sir, that after a year to Whataora, the waiting list now is, they guarantee you'll get there within a year. This just came out in the last 24 hours. This was an assurance. They'll get to you within a year. Now, this is appalling. We're going massively backwards. We spent all this money, and we're going in the wrong direction. And so the answer is, what are you going to do about it? Well, we're going to take a whole lot of wasted expenditure, and I've given you some of the examples, and focus on critical expenditure of the 4 things I mentioned, and health and education are 2 of them, and get you attention much more quickly than that. But these waiting lists are awful, and just at the very time when the health system was under huge challenge, the Labour Party decided to reconfigure it all, right in the middle of a crisis. And it's a very sad circumstance at the moment. And I feel sorry for all those who are medical practitioners, be they specialists, be they doctors, be they nurses. I've never seen the circumstance as bad as it is now. And as I said, all this recruitment, 100,000 coming here, last 8 months, not one overseas doctor. and the nurses won't be much better. Look, I'm going to make one last question because this meeting is going on, and I've got to hit the road because tomorrow's another day. No, sir, could you be the last? No, sorry, madam, I'll be fair. Him first and you last. How about him first? Yes.
At the Wellington protest, I was there, mandated, and just want to make sure that when New Zealand First comes in next year or this year, that they're going to change the school curriculum, because next year we have to teach Maori myths and legends in science, and I know a lot of science teachers will be leaving the profession because of it.
Yes, sir. Thank you very much for your comment. He wants to know about the school curriculum next year. Our focus when we get back in is to ensure that the three fundamentals of traditional 3 R's are a priority, and then students get the opportunity to maximise their educational base and make all the other decisions in their life sometime later on, and not be the victim of some social engineering narrative comprised of an elitist bunch who speak for no one. Yes. Yes, madam. Now, this is the last question, so make it a good one.
Thank you for being here and listening to us, Winston. What I would like to know is whether you are aware, and also the people here today, medical mandates are actually still in place in the workforce. Even though Jacinda Ardern pronounced mandates over, what happened in the medical space is that hospitals were able to make their own rules. So in this room, I know we have got experienced nurses, and I know the people, so this is true, doctors, pharmacists, midwives. We have people in the Hawke's Bay who have experience, who are trained, and they are still mandated and not able to apply or get jobs in the Hawke's Bay Hospital. Are you aware of that?
Yes, I am aware of the fact that we'll have our experience yourself. You go off to a medical facility and you find them asserting practices which have been abandoned across the country, so to speak. Yes, I am aware of it, and nobody wants to interfere with medical practice, but they should be required to justify that alongside the best medical practice worldwide, not to set their own narrow standards, so to speak. But I'm sometimes astonished to go into people and they're demanding you wear a mask. The mask is defective. It's no darn good to anybody. It's not a medical mask. Well, it's not a medical mask. It's rubbish. We know it. We were trying to get this stuff when we were ministers, but that's sad. And so we've got to have to ask people to start enforcing standards that are credible and believable, rather than arbitrary ones. Ladies and gentlemen, look, thank you for coming out in the Hawke's Bay again. Thank you for the questions, and I hope you understand, sir, when I was having a go at you, it's because I want people, when something goes wrong, to stand up and do something and not just take it lying down. I don't, my colleagues don't, and I hope we don't. Thank you very much.